Historical Timeline of Bilingual Education, CAA number 3 by Vanessa Montoya. The first historical event that we are going to look at is Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka in 1954. This case involved Oliver Brown's daughter, Linda Brown, as she was denied entrance into a Topeka elementary school that consisted of an enrollment of all white students. There were 4 other cases involved with Brown's class action suit that were combined under one name of Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka. This was a Supreme Court case in regards to racial segregation of children in public schools was unconstitutional. This Supreme Court case helped fuel the pursued motion to obtain a quality education for all students regardless of race, ethnicity, or gender. Civil Rights Act of 1964. The act outlawed segregation in businesses such as theaters, restaurants, and hotels. It banned discriminatory practices in enrollment and ended segregation in public places such as swimming pools, libraries, and public schools. This would impact not only those of the African American community, but also those of different cultures and backgrounds that do not speak the English language as their native language. Elementary and Secondary Education Act. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965 was a keystone of President Lyndon B. Johnson's time in office. This law is significant to education in regards to representation of equal and high-quality education for all students. A quote is, ESEA is an extensive statute that funds primary and secondary education, emphasizing high standards and accountability. As mandated in the Act, funds are authorized for professional development, instructional materials, resources to support educational programs, and the promotion of parental involvement. The Act had appropriations that were carried out for 5 fiscal years. The government has reauthorized the Act every 5 years since its enactment. In the course of these reauthorizations, a variety of revisions and amendments have been introduced. Bilingual Education Act of 1968. The Bilingual Education Act, also known as BEA, was the first piece of the United States federal legislation that recognized the needs for limited English-speaking ability students, also known as LESA students, to receive a quality education. A quote being, its purpose was to provide school districts with federal funds in the form of competitive grants to establish innovative educational programs for students with limited English-speaking ability. Equal Education Opportunities Act of 1974. The Equal Education Opportunity Act of 1974, also known as EEOA, was an amendment to the Elementary and Secondary Educational Act that we have discussed previously. The rights that the EEOA provided to limited English proficient students were also eventually made ineffective, though this occurred in a more indirect manner. Equal Education Opportunities Act declared it to be the policy of the United States that all children enrolled in public schools are entitled to equal educational opportunity without regard to race, color, sex, or national origin, and that the neighborhood is the appropriate basis for determining public school assignments. The purpose of this act is to authorize concentration of resources under the Emergency School Aid Act on educationally deprived students and to specify appropriate remedies for the orderly removal of vestiges of the dual school system. Lowell versus Nichols of 1974. There was an incident within a school system in San Francisco, California, that failed to provide English language instruction to students of Chinese descent whom did not speak English nor provided the appropriate alternate instruction. This failed to follow the Civil Rights Act of 1964, stating equal education for all students in a public school setting. The school district that was involved in this litigation received large amounts of federal financial assistance. Therefore, was an extremity of the case to be heard so that there would be a change for those LESA students. Serna v. Portales of 1974. This case involved Mexican American students in New Mexico. The district's statistics were analyzed to show that the Mexican American students were underperforming compared to the students whom English was their native language. However, it was discovered that these children were treated poorly compared to the American students, thus the case ruling as neglect in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Rios versus Reed of 1978. The case was taken place in New York and was argued under the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and the Equal Education Opportunities Act. Puerto Rican parents claimed that many bilingual education programs were not bilingual, but based mainly on ESL, which is English as a Second Language. The federal court found the district's bilingual programs to be ineffective and insufficient. This case is significant because it made a strong case for offering bilingual education and for making more effective educational programs. Castaneda v. Pickard of 1981. The case was about Castaneda's daughter's rights being violated within their school in regards to the ELL education. The initial complaint argued the use of ability grouping was improperly used to put all Mexican American students into one group that were not integrated with the students whose native language was English. The case also stated that the district did not help students with the language barriers because of the lack of development of bilingual programs. In the end, the case ruled in favor of the district. However, a few years later on, the court overruled and ruled in favor of Castaneda and his family, leaning towards more efficient educational programs for ESL students. The No Child Left Behind Act of 2001 all the way up to present day. The NCLB, also known as the No Child Left Behind Act, drastically altered the federal government's approach to bilingual education. The NCLB emphasized the English language instruction and to integrate ELL students into regular classrooms as quickly as possible. A quote being, "In most circumstances, the NCLB allows for a maximum of 3-year transition period for English learning students to be placed in classes with native English speakers." Since there was such an emphasis on standardized testing and more emphasis on standardized testing recently, English learning students must have taken the same standardized tests as other students. Sometimes they will be given an assistant given assistance to help make sure that the student is as successful as possible while taking these exams. Here are my references for my CAA. Thank you for watching.